If you're captivated by stories of hidden identities and triumphant underdogs, remember to subscribe to our channel for more tales that will touch your heart. Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil, a man whose name was synonymous with stratospheric wealth, stood before a crowd of journalists, his face a mask of cold authority. Beside him, quivering with a mixture of fear and rage, stood Zara Williams, a single mother who cleaned his hangars for a living. The air crackled with tension. The sheikh's voice, a low baritone accustomed to absolute obedience, cut through the silence. "You want to prove your worth?" he sneered, his gaze sweeping over Zara's simple, worn uniform. He gestured to the gleaming billion-dollar private jet behind them, a machine of impossible complexity and power. "Fly this jet," he declared, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Fly this jet, and I'll marry you." A collective gasp rippled through the press corps. It was a joke, a public humiliation of the highest order. But what the billionaire sheikh didn't know was that in his arrogance, he had just challenged the one woman who could actually do it. Her secret was about to make him speechless and shatter the very foundations of his world. What happened next would change everything, not just for the cleaner and the sheikh, but for everyone who witnessed it. Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil lived a life insulated by glass and steel. From his penthouse office, which occupied the entire top floor of the Al-Jamil Tower, he watched the city breathe below him, a distant, abstract organism. He managed his late father's empire, a sprawling conglomerate of shipping, logistics, and private aviation, with a ruthless efficiency that had tripled its value. But this success was a hollow thing. Grief was the true architect of his life, a cold, invisible structure he had built around his heart after his father's private jet fell from the sky a decade ago. He trusted no one and nothing, least of all the fallible humans who worked for him. His obsession was control. He demanded perfection, scrutinizing maintenance logs and weather reports with a forensic intensity, believing that if he could master every variable, he could prevent the lightning of tragedy from ever striking again. Meanwhile, miles away, in the cavernous, echoing space of the Al-Jamil private airfield, Zara Williams was wiping down the fuselage of a Gulfstream. Her movements were economical and precise, a quiet dance of diligence. Every swipe of her cloth was a small act of defiance against the world that had tried to break her. After her shift, she would pick up her 7-year-old son Leo from school, and his bright, gap-toothed smile was the only dividend that ever truly mattered. He was her world, the reason she endured the condescending sneers of the hangar manager, Marcus Thorne. "Make sure you get that spot," Marcus drawled, pointing a stubby finger at an imaginary smudge. "We wouldn't want your kind of dirt rubbing off on the sheikh's property." Zara's jaw tightened, but she simply nodded and polished the already gleaming surface, her dignity a shield he could never penetrate. One sweltering Tuesday, Khalid felt the familiar, restless ghost of his father's memory stir within him. He craved the grit of reality, a break from the sterile perfection of his tower. He decided, on a whim, to see the heart of his aviation operations, not as a sheikh, but as a worker. He had his head of security, a discreet man named Faris, arrange a temporary low-level position for him at the private hangar. He would be Kareem, a new maintenance trainee. He donned a simple mechanic's jumpsuit, the rough fabric a shocking contrast to his usual bespoke suits, and drove himself to the airfield in an unremarkable sedan. The transformation was startling. Without the aura of his wealth, he was just another man, invisible. It was an unsettling yet exhilarating feeling. He had been on site for less than an hour, tasked with organizing a tool locker, when he heard Marcus Thorne's grating voice escalate in volume. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" Marcus bellowed. Khalid peered around a stack of crates. He saw Zara standing ramrod straight, a bucket and mop in her hands. She had accidentally tipped her bucket, sending a small wave of soapy water near the tires of a stationary jet. It was a minor incident, easily cleaned. "I am so sorry, Mr. Thorne," Zara said, her voice steady despite the public humiliation. "I will clean it up immediately." Marcus stepped closer, his face contorted with scorn. "Immediately isn't good enough. This is a multi-million-dollar machine, not some welfare office floor. One more mistake like this, Williams, and you'll be cleaning toilets at the bus station. Is that clear? Khalid felt a hot, unfamiliar anger surge through him. He watched Zara, expecting her to cry or shrink away. Instead, she met Marcus's glare with a quiet, unyielding strength that took Khalid's breath away. "Yes, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and devoid of fear. "It's perfectly clear." As she knelt to sop up the water, her back straight and her movements deliberate, Khalid realized he was witnessing a form of courage he had never encountered in any boardroom. In the days that followed, Khalid, as Karim, settled into the rhythms of the hangar. He learned the names of the mechanics, the smell of jet fuel, the satisfying heft of a torque wrench. But his true focus was Zara. He watched her from afar, a silent observer of her unwavering integrity. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Her work was not just thorough, it was reverent. She treated the magnificent aircraft with a respect that bordered on affection, her hands tracing their lines as if she understood the soul of the machine. He also watched Marcus Thorne. The manager was a petty tyrant, but Khalid began to suspect it was more than that. He saw Marcus signing off on supply manifests without checking the deliveries. He noticed that boxes of certified high-grade lubricants were being replaced with cheaper off-brand drums. When Karim innocently asked about it, Marcus had snarled, "Mind your own business, trainee. You're paid to lift, not to think." The cruelty towards Zara was constant. He would accidentally spill coffee where she had just cleaned, change her shift schedule at the last minute without notice, and make thinly veiled racist remarks loud enough for her to hear. One afternoon, hidden in a quiet corner of the break room, Khalid overheard Zara on the phone. Her voice, usually so composed, was soft with love. "Yes, sweetie, I'll be home soon. Yes, we can read the book about the stars. I know, baby. I know the rent is due. Mommy will figure it out. I always do." The conversation was a punch to Khalid's gut. He, a man who could buy entire city blocks, was listening to this woman of immense character worry about rent. The chasm between their lives felt obscene. He felt a powerful protective instinct rising within him, a feeling so alien it almost frightened him. He had to know more about her. He had to understand the source of her incredible resilience. A week into his undercover stint, a minor crisis erupted. A warning light blinked on the console of a Bombardier Global 6000 scheduled for a flight that evening. A hydraulic pressure sensor was failing. Panic, low-grade but palpable, rippled through the maintenance crew. Marcus barked contradictory orders, creating more confusion than clarity. "Check the reservoir." "No. Run a diagnostic on the pump. Get the manual." Amid the chaos, Zara, who had been quietly cleaning the cabin, stepped out onto the tarmac. She glanced at the frantic mechanics, then at the access panel near the wing root, where the hydraulic lines were housed. She approached Karim, who was standing by, observing. "The fluctuation is too rhythmic to be a pump failure," she said, her voice low and certain. "It's likely a pinhole leak in the actuator line for the port side flap. The pressure drops every time the system cycles a self-test." Khalid stared at her. She wasn't speaking like a cleaner. She was speaking like an engineer or a pilot. "You should tell them to check the braided hose connection at the primary joint," she added, before seeming to catch herself. She blushed slightly, as if she had spoken out of turn. "It's just, I read a lot," she mumbled, quickly retreating with her cleaning cart. The lead mechanic, having overheard, followed her advice. Within minutes, they found it. A tiny, almost invisible fissure in the exact spot she had indicated. The crisis was averted. Later that day, Khalid found her sitting alone on a bench at the edge of the airfield, watching the planes take off. She was holding a small, worn photograph. He sat down a respectful distance away. "That was amazing what you did earlier," he said softly. She looked up, startled. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," he insisted. "You saved them. Hours of work, maybe even saved a flight." A sad smile touched her lips. She glanced down at the photo in her hand. It was of a much younger Zara, beaming, in a flight suit, standing in front of a military transport plane. Before Khalid could ask, she tucked it away. "I just want a good life for my son, Leo," she said, changing the subject. "He's so smart. He loves planes. He wants to be an astronaut." She spoke of her son's dreams, her fears about a leak in their apartment roof, her simple hope for a future where they wouldn't have to worry about every dollar. For the first time in a decade, Khalid Al-Jamil listened. He didn't offer solutions or money. He just listened. And as he heard the quiet dignity in her voice, he felt the icy walls around his heart begin to crack and melt under the warmth of her simple, profound humanity. That night, Khalid couldn't sleep. Zara's technical knowledge about the hydraulic line echoed in his mind. It was too specific, too confident. Back in his penthouse, he shed the identity of Kareem and became the Sheikh again. He sat before his bank of monitors, not to review stock prices, but to pull two specific files. The first was Zara Williams's employment application. It was sparse, previous jobs listed as a waitress, a store clerk. No mention of aviation. But then he ran a deeper, more private search, using the kind of security clearance only he possessed. Her real history unfurled across his screen, and he felt a jolt as if he'd touched a live wire. Captain Zara Williams, United States Air Force, top of her class at the academy, decorated pilot with over 3,000 flight hours in heavy transport aircraft. An incident report was attached. A catastrophic engine failure during a humanitarian mission. She had managed to land the crippled plane, saving all 30 souls aboard, but a powerful senator's son, a co-pilot who had ignored pre-flight warnings, made her the scapegoat to save his own career. She was honorably discharged, but her professional reputation was shattered. She had disappeared into civilian life to protect her son from the fallout. She wasn't just a cleaner who read a lot. She was a hero. The second file he pulled was on Marcus Thorne. The discrepancies he'd noticed as Kareem were the tip of a terrifying iceberg. He tasked his financial forensics team with a deep dive. The report came back within hours, and its contents made Khalid's blood run cold. For 2 years, Marcus had been running a sophisticated procurement fraud. He was ordering certified top-of-the-line aircraft parts through the official system, then returning them for a refund via a shell corporation. In their place, he was installing dangerously cheap, uncertified counterfeits from an overseas supplier. The profit margins were enormous, and the risk was catastrophic. Khalid felt a wave of nausea. He looked at a photograph of his father on his desk. An investigator's report had called his father's crash a result of catastrophic, mechanical failure of unknown origin. Unknown origin. Was this it? Had this same rot, this same greedy betrayal, killed his father? The problem wasn't just a bully in a hangar. It was a deadly cancer inside his own company, and Zara was the only person who seemed to possess the integrity to even notice something was wrong. The stakes had just escalated from a personal injustice to a threat against his entire legacy and the lives of countless passengers. The knowledge of Marcus's betrayal settled in Khalid's chest like a block of ice. It was a personal affront, a ghost of his father's tragedy made real and present. His first instinct was to have Marcus arrested quietly, to excise the cancer with a swift, silent incision. But then he thought of Zara. He thought of her quiet dignity as Marcus humiliated her, of her expert knowledge dismissed as a fluke, of the hero forced to scrub floors to feed her child. A quiet dismissal wasn't enough. The injustice done to her and the danger posed by Marcus demanded the light of day. It demanded a public reckoning. A plan began to form in his mind, audacious and theatrical. He would not just expose Marcus, he would elevate Zara. He would use his power not just to punish, but to restore. He picked up the phone and called his director of communications. "Schedule a press conference," he commanded, his voice steel, "for tomorrow afternoon, at the private airfield. The subject, Sheikh Al-Jamil, the unveiling of our new flagship aircraft, the Falcon 1. I will be making the announcement personally. I want every major news outlet there." Falcon 1 was his prized possession, the most advanced private jet in the world, delivered just last month. It was the perfect stage. He then made another call, this time to Hamid, his elderly and loyal major domo, the only person who knew about his Kareem disguise. He explained the situation, the fraud, and his plan. Hamid listened patiently. "She is a woman of great honor, Khalid," Hamid said, his voice warm with approval. "Your father would be proud of the man you are becoming." Bolstered, Khalid went to the hangar the next morning, back in his jumpsuit. He found Zara cleaning the windows of the main office. "Big day today," he said, affecting the easygoing manner of Kareem. "The sheikh himself is coming." Zara nodded, her expression unreadable. "I need some help," Khalid continued, "with the Falcon One. Just a final polish before the reporters get here. They assigned it to me, and I could use an extra pair of hands. Someone who knows how to be careful." He was asking her to help prepare the very stage where her life would be irrevocably changed. A small, grateful smile touched her lips. "Of course, Kareem. I can help." He felt a pang of guilt at his deception, but he knew it was necessary. He had to keep her close, to ensure she was in the right place at the exact right time. Marcus Thorne was sweating. The announcement of the Sheikh's personal visit had put him on edge. The new trainee, Kareem, had been asking too many questions, looking at things that were none of his business. Marcus felt the walls closing in. He needed leverage. He needed a distraction. And he found it in Zara. He knew security was heightened for the Sheikh's visit, and he decided to use it to his advantage. He watched as Zara and Kareem finished their work on the gleaming Falcon One. When Zara put her cleaning cart away and went to her locker to retrieve her bag before the press event started, Marcus made his move. He'd earlier stolen a handheld, highly expensive avionics diagnostic tool from the master tool chest. As Zara turned her back for a moment, he slipped it into her open tote bag. A minute later, he walked loudly over to the head of the Sheikh's security detail. "We have a problem," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "One of our most expensive diagnostic tools has gone missing, and I think I know who has it." He led the guards to the employee locker area, where Zara was just about to leave. "Mrs. Williams," a guard said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Would you mind if we searched your bag?" Zara looked stunned, her face paling. "Search my bag? Why?" "Just a precaution," the guard said. Zara, flustered but knowing she had nothing to hide, handed it over. The guard opened it and pulled out the gleaming, complex piece of equipment. Gasps were audible from the few mechanics standing nearby. Marcus stepped forward, his face a mask of triumphant pity. "I just can't believe it," he said, shaking his head. "I gave you so many chances, Zara. But I guess your kind just can't help it. A common criminal." The words, sharp and venomous, struck Zara like a physical blow. Her eyes filled with tears of shock and humiliation. I didn't," she stammered, looking from the tool to Marcus's smug face. "I would never." "Take her to the security office," Marcus ordered the guards. "Keep her there until we figure out what to do with her." As the guards led a devastated Zara away, just minutes before the press conference was set to begin, Marcus felt a surge of relief. He had neutralized the nosy trainee's friend and created the perfect diversion. He straightened his tie and walked toward the hangar floor, ready to greet the Sheikh. He was certain he had won. The hangar was buzzing, cameras flashed, and reporters jostled for position in front of the magnificent Falcon One. Marcus Thorne stood near the podium, preening, accepting congratulations from junior executives on the pristine condition of the facility. He felt powerful, in control. At exactly 2 p.m., a hush fell over the crowd as Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil strode into the hangar, but he wasn't wearing the immaculate suit everyone expected. He was wearing the simple, grease-stained jumpsuit of a maintenance trainee. He walked right past the podium and stood in the center of the floor, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Marcus. A low murmur rippled through the reporters. "Who is that? Is that a mechanic?" Khalid ignored them. His voice, amplified by the hangar's acoustics, boomed through the space. "My name is Khalid al-Jamil," he said. The murmur turned into a collective gasp. Marcus Thorne's face went white as a sheet. He looked at the man in the jumpsuit and saw, for the first time, the cold, aristocratic features of his ultimate boss. For the past 2 weeks, Khalid continued, his gaze still locked on Marcus, I have been working here as a trainee named Kareem. I wanted to see my company from the ground up, and I have seen many things. I have seen dedication and hard work, and I have seen corruption, cruelty, and lies. He took a step toward Marcus, who looked like he might faint. Just before this event, you accused a woman, a cleaner named Zara Williams, of theft. You planted evidence in her bag to have her removed. Khalid turned to his head of security. Bring her here. Now. A moment later, 2 guards emerged, escorting a tear-streaked and bewildered Zara. The cameras swiveled to capture her shocked face. Mr. Thorne, Khalid said, his voice dangerously soft. You claim this woman is a thief, a person of no worth who doesn't belong here. Marcus, sputtering, tried to recover. Your Highness, Sheikh, she's just a cleaner. She was framed. I mean, she is a criminal. Khalid smiled, a terrifying, mirthless expression. This woman is more qualified to be in this hangar than you will ever be. In fact, I have a proposition. He turned his full attention to Zara, his eyes suddenly gentle. The world seemed to fade away for them. They say this jet is the pinnacle of aviation. I say the pilot is what matters. The crowd held its breath. Fly this jet, Zara, he declared, his voice ringing with challenge and an undercurrent of something else. Faith. Take it up and bring it back, and I'll marry you. A tidal wave of shock washed over the hangar. It was an insane, impossible demand. Marcus Thorne burst into laughter, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. Her? The cleaner? She can't even fly a kite. This is absurd. But Zara wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking at Khalid. In his eyes, she didn't see mockery. She saw an apology. She saw trust. She saw a plea. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't a humiliation. It was an exoneration. With all eyes on her, Zara's fear dissolved, replaced by a cold, familiar fire. She took a deep breath. She straightened her shoulders, and the weary cleaner vanished, replaced by the ghost of a captain. She walked past the sneering Marcus, past the stunned reporters, and straight toward the open cockpit door of the Falcon 1. She didn't say a word. Her movements were her statement. She settled into the pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the controls with an innate familiarity that silenced the entire room. She began the pre-flight checklist from memory, her fingers dancing across the complex array of switches and buttons, her voice a calm professional murmur as she went through the litany. The hangar was dead silent, save for the hum of the jet's auxiliary power unit, which she had just brought to life. The roar of the Falcon 1's twin engines shook the very foundations of the hangar as Zara taxied the behemoth onto the private runway with a fluid grace that defied belief. The reporters, who had been scrambling over one another, now stood in stunned silence, their cameras trained on the runway. Khalid stood motionless, his arms crossed, his face a mask of calm confidence. Marcus Thorne, however, was crumbling, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the impossible unfold. With a surge of power, the jet raced down the tarmac and lifted into the sky, climbing at a steep, breathtaking angle. For 10 minutes, the world watched. Zara didn't just fly the jet, she danced with it. She executed a series of maneuvers, a steep climb, a banking turn so precise it seemed painted on the sky, and finally, a low-altitude pass over the airfield that was so smooth, so controlled, it was a signature. It was a maneuver taught only to elite military pilots to test an aircraft's responsiveness under pressure. On the ground, a veteran aviation journalist lowered his camera. "My God," he whispered to his colleague. "That's not just flying. That's artistry." When the Falcon 1 touched down, its landing was as soft as a whisper, the tires kissing the asphalt with textbook perfection. As the engines spooled down, Khalid walked onto the tarmac. He didn't wait for the stairs. He stood at the bottom of the cockpit door as it opened. Zara appeared, her expression serene. She had proven her point. Khalid didn't smile. He looked at her with a profound respect that was more intimate than any embrace. "Captain Williams," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearest microphones to catch. "It's an honor." He then turned to face the crowd, and to Marcus, who was now being flanked by security. While Captain Williams was demonstrating her credentials, Khalid announced, his voice like ice, my team was compiling a file. A large screen behind the podium flickered to life. It showed copies of forged invoices, shipping manifests for counterfeit parts, bank statements from Marcus's offshore accounts, showing deposits that matched the exact value of the stolen equipment. Marcus Thorne has not only been stealing from this company, Khalid declared, he has been endangering the lives of every single person who flies in one of our aircraft by installing uncertified, substandard parts. It is a betrayal of the highest order. The police, who had been waiting discreetly, moved in. As they snapped handcuffs on a pale, trembling Marcus, he shrieked, "You can't prove anything!" Khalid simply pointed to the screen, where a final piece of evidence appeared. Security footage of Marcus slipping the diagnostic tool into Zara's bag. The takedown was absolute, public, and brutal. After Marcus was led away, Khalid turned back to Zara. "The marriage proposal was a foolish and arrogant gesture," he said quietly, for her ears only. "A challenge, when I should have simply offered my trust. Forgive me." He then spoke louder, for all to hear. "I am offering you the position of chief pilot and head of safety for the entire Al Jamil global fleet. I need someone with your integrity, your skill, to fix what men like him have broken." Zara looked at him, then at the jet, then at the faces of the stunned crowd. She thought of her son, Leo. She thought of the years spent in the shadows. She smiled, a real radiant smile this time. "Sheikh Al Jamil," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I accept." A year later, the Al Jamil global fleet was the safest in the world. Captain Zara Williams was not just a pilot, she was a legend. As the new executive vice president of safety and training, she had systematically overhauled every protocol. She had implemented a culture of transparency and accountability, rooting out the last vestiges of corruption with a quiet but unyielding determination. The mechanics and pilots revered her. She knew their names, understood their challenges, and treated them with the same dignity she had always carried herself. She and Leo now lived in a beautiful, light-filled house in a quiet, leafy suburb. Khalid had offered her a mansion, a palace, but she had politely refused. She had earned her own home, and its comfort was all the sweeter for it. Khalid was a changed man. The grief for his father hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined him. Zara had shown him that control wasn't about preventing tragedy, but about building a life of integrity and connection that could withstand it. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. He had dismantled the glass walls of his penthouse office, often choosing to work from a modest office at the airfield, close to the heart of the operation. He was a frequent visitor at Zara and Leo's home. He wasn't a sheikh there, he was just Khalid. He helped Leo with his science homework, and taught him the constellations through a telescope set up in the backyard. Tonight, they were watching a meteor shower. Leo, tucked between them on a blanket, had just fallen asleep. The silence was comfortable, filled with the quiet hum of crickets and the vastness of the starry sky. "A year ago," Khalid said, his voice soft, "I made you a very public, very foolish proposition on a tarmac." Zara turned to look at him, her silhouette framed by the gentle glow of the porch light. "You were making a point," she said, a hint of laughter in her voice. "It was very dramatic." "I was," he admitted. "But I was also hiding. Behind my title, my wealth, my anger." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "I don't want to hide anymore, Zara, and I don't want to make a challenge. I want to ask a question." He turned to face her fully, his eyes full of a sincerity that made her heart ache with happiness. "Zara Williams, you are the strongest, most honorable person I have ever known. You saved me from myself. Will you marry me? Not because you can fly a jet, but because I cannot imagine my life without you and Leo in it." Tears welled in Zara's eyes, but these were tears of pure joy. She thought of the long, difficult road that had brought her to this quiet, perfect moment. "Yes, Khalid," she whispered. "Yes, I will." In the end, the greatest fortunes are not measured in dollars or in gold, but in the wealth of character and the richness of a heart brave enough to love. What do you think is the true measure of a person's worth? If this story inspired you, please like this video and subscribe for more tales of love, justice, and redemption. We'll see you in the next story.